For quite a while, I've been kicking around a set of ideas that I've tried to share already, but maybe I can explain them a little better now. So during COVID, there were all these snares, there were all these traps that you were warned about before they were sprung, and they didn't seem like a big deal at the time through a mix of unbelief or normalcy bias or just a wish that they weren't true, which is really all the same thing. It's just unbelief. But you were told more about what was going to happen. You were given the reasons it was going to happen, and you chose not to believe the cost and benefit that was being shown to you, the long term cost and benefit of your current actions. And then things happened, and it became more obvious what the actual cost and benefit was, that it was closer to what you were told than what you thought. And then you had a more costly set of actions that you could take or not take. This is a pattern. And as you go through more and more cycles of this pattern, you should take away from it a more accurate idea of your ability to assess what options are and what they cost ahead of time, and also that ability in other people, because if they got it right, you should believe them more than you did before. If they got it wrong, you should believe them less. That's the way credibility works, right? So lately, I've seen a lot of news about the food system, and this is one of many components to the idea of moving. Now, in short, what I've suggested you do is start taking reasonable actions to get closer to the place you want to be in the state you want to be in. I don't mean the state in the United States. The state you want to be in when things really fall apart. And that's a lot for people to wrap their heads around. But the way snares work is they start off as light cords, just like a light twine, but they get thicker and thicker over time and they turn into chains. Now, again, using COVID as an example, before it happened, there was a warning it would happen. As it was happening, you were told ahead of time the way things were going to advance. And then when that happened, all of a sudden the cord was a chain. So, for example, let's suppose that you weren't interested in getting the shot, but you found yourself all of the sudden in a situation where you had to get it or get fired. So those are sudden extreme consequences, but they were actually told to you before they happened. And there were reasonable things that you should have done before then to prevent being in that situation, but you chose not to. Likewise, the same thing is happening on multiple fronts right now. I'm making a chain of videos at the moment. I have a few minutes before my next thing I need to go do. And I made a video about the military and the draft. That's a thing. That's a component of this where drastically different consequences are on the horizon. And right now, with what you're doing or not doing, you're choosing them. And it's difficult because most people don't anticipate them, but that doesn't make it any less likely. You look at the reasons, you decide for yourself. Don't just assume that because it's not that way right this second, apparently, it won't be like that tomorrow. If there's sufficient reasons, then you need to believe it. And otherwise, you're going to suffer the negative consequences of not believing it. So let's talk about the food system. More and more, I'm seeing things about mandatory culling of herds, flocks, whatever the animals are, things we eat. Mandatory vaccination of things we eat. Vaccination, injecting experimental therapeutics into the foods that we eat. Making changes to the genetic code of the things that we eat. And while none of these things are necessarily bad, in a complex system, you should assume that change will lead to worse outcomes because it's more and more likely the more complex the system is. And so we're in a position where most people rely on the big picture global system, whatever it is, your work, your food, your living, whatever it is, your ability to drive to work, your clothing, whatever it is. Hardly anyone is anything near self-sufficient. Even the Amish, as heralded as they are for being examples of being self-sufficient, their communities would collapse if people didn't buy overpriced furniture and bread and jam and stuff from them. So they're still in the system. They're just a half a step removed. This is a problem, and it's a very expensive problem to solve. So the issue is that any change at all seems to be too big to even think about, and it's overwhelming because just like most people financially live check to check, you probably live the challenges in your life check to check. What do I mean by that? You have probably only developed as a person just as far as you need to deal with the situations you face right now. What that does is it subjects you to a constant stream of situations that overwhelm you because you've never bothered to advance past the point of equilibrium with the current situation. And so you don't have ideas, you don't have resources, you don't have character traits sufficient to deal with worse than what you already deal with. You live check to check with your character. So all these things I've mentioned, food, water, where you live, how you work, all these things are like that. But as you start to dig into what you would need to do to have a surplus, it's very overwhelming because you find out very quickly that little steps are not enough. There's a property in life, and I don't know what to call this yet, where for most people to improve a ton, all they have to do is something very little. But once you go through a few of those iterations where you've done little things to get these outsized positive changes, you run out of those, and every step of progress beyond that cost exponentially more than what the prior stuff did. This is a property that you will find true in life. And high achievers will know that what I'm saying is true. They're nodding their heads vigorously right now. And that's why it's so frustrating if you've really sacrificed a lot in life and been successful in whatever aim you had, when people say, oh, that must be nice for that to just sort of happen to you. Because you know that you had to pay an exponentially higher price for incremental improvements that folks who won't even bother doing the little things with the outsized results, just they can't comprehend it. So with the food system, you should be very careful as things unfold, because they're going to be putting stuff in the food and they're going to be changing the way you get it. And you really shouldn't be surprised when, in order to use the systems that you're accustomed to, you have to submit to constraints that you're not okay with. It's going to happen. It's not theoretical. It already happened with COVID. And it wasn't just your jobs. You had to submit to masks and this and that and social distancing and report to whatever if you get these symptoms and you're quarantined and whatever. That same mentality is going to just get more widespread with every subsequent thing. And so what are you going to do if they keep, for various reasons, reducing the size of the cow herd in the United States? It's as low as it's been since, I think, 1960 right now. So no wonder beef costs a fortune, but there's also skyrocketing labor costs. What are you going to do as they keep killing chickens because these sketchy PCR tests say that they have bird flu when they probably don't? What are you going to do if chicken eggs cost $10 a dozen instead of whatever they are right now, $2.50 or something? What are you going to do? And if you think about these things ahead of time, you can start planning for those. But you can't do any of this beyond your ability to cope with what currently overwhelms you. You need surplus. Surplus ability to think about things, surplus ability to act beyond whatever you're doing now, surplus ability to earn more than you're currently earning or spend less than you're currently spending, surplus emotional capability. You know, how easily do you get stressed? How quickly do you recover when something is a negative surprise? How badly can someone else hurt your feelings, and how much does it debilitate you? You have to develop a surplus, or else you will not be ready for surprises. If you want to do these things, I highly recommend as a resource this book I wrote called Joy on Purpose. It'll help you get your life into an intentional frame. Instead of life happening to you, you'll get to design how you want yours to go. And it's empowering to take the wheel and say, these are the actions I'm going to take, and here's why. And I think you'll find that book very helpful if that's interesting to you. But whether you read the book or not, I highly recommend you start to think about ways that you can reduce your dependency on the factory food system that we have today. Because for many people, you're going to be in a place where you have to submit to things that you wouldn't otherwise submit to because you're stuck in a trap and you don't have any other options. Or those options are such high cost that you can't afford to take them.